Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. I thought yesterday was Thursday.
Yeah, somebody booked a meeting with me. I read that it was Friday, and then the reply was like, grabbed a time for tomorrow. And I was like, what are you talking about? Today's Wednesday. Nope.
I was in a pairing with my coworker yesterday, and I was like, dude, this has been such a long week. And he's like, brother, it's a Wednesday. And I'm like, was distraught.
It's going to be even longer. No.
Yeah, it's going to get worse.
Yeah. No, I saw last night or whatever, there was a new Ruby 3.3 at CVE, but it was only 3.3, which is interesting. So I guess it doesn't affect Ruby 4. I'm not sure. And then I forget, is there a list on the Ruby website with what's currently maintained? I guess it's under the downloads page. It's like stable releases, Ruby 4.0, 3.4, 3.3, 3.2. But 3.2 is heading its way out the door.
Yeah,
but David, didn't you say the same thing for 3.3?
Yeah. Look, it's on the link that you've put in the chat first that Ruby 3.3 enters a security maintenance phase after this release.
Okay. It'll still be maintained for a while, but...
until end of March 2027.
Okay, so a year. So then that probably means the end of March 2026 in a couple days. 3.1. Let's see. No, wait, 3.1 is end of life. 3.2 probably goes end of life, I'm guessing then. And then 3.3 is security. It'd be nice if they labeled that a little bit on the website there, which is in its security phase or whatever. I've never looked into contributing to that.
They do have a list of the security CVEs on the right, which is nice.
Yeah, which is basically a zlib gzip reader CVE, buffer overflow.
So you can just update the gem, it looks like, if you don't want to update Ruby.
Zlib is one of the built-in gems, I'm guessing then. So that's why they cut a release for it. But then that must mean Zlib is even newer for 3.4 and 4.0 or something. Maybe that's why 3.2 didn't get a release or something. Maybe it's already end of maintenance. I don't know.
It says here that for Ruby 3.2 users, update to Zlib 3.0.1. For Ruby 3.3 users, update to Zlib 3.1.2.
Yeah. So they must have just updated the gem, but I don't know. Interesting that it's not like they didn't cut a release of 3.2 as well.
It's
and then
interesting.
This isn't an issue in 3.4.
Yeah. What's also interesting is it says the affected versions are Zlib 3.2.2 and lower, but they recommend you update Zlib to 3.2.3 or later, but to ensure compatibility with bundled version in older Ruby, you can update 3.2 to 3.0.1 and 3.3 to 3.1.2. I don't understand that.
It's Thursday. There's too many numbers that start with 3, right?
Yeah,
now.
I did say a lot of 3 right there.
Yeah. Speaking of vulnerabilities, we got 2 Rails releases this week. So 8.1.2.1, which is like the 4th number is like the security version or whatever. Yeah, so it looks like there were several CVEs. So 1, 2, 3 in active support. Reject scientific notation in number converter. Fix safe buffer to preserve unsafe status. Improve performance of number to delimited converter. That one's interesting. It's a CVE though. I wonder if it's like a denial of service thing where it's slow or whatever. It used a regular expression with gsub bang to insert thousands delimiters. This could produce quadratic time complexity on long digit strings. Interesting. Safe buffer thing sounds dangerous because that one you don't want things to be marked as HTML safe when they're not. So that was a cross-site scripting vulnerability there. That one's interesting. The number converter one says scientific notation like 1E 10,000, like 1 to the 10,000th or whatever. That will reject those for excessive memory allocation and CPU consumption. What are you saying, Andrew?
The one from Monday, I think, is more interesting. Rails 7.2.3.1, 8.0.4.1,
yeah, this is what
8.1.2.1.
That's what I'm reading through.
Oh, you are?
8.1.2.1. So those were active support. Then Action View had to skip blank attribute names and tag helpers to avoid generating invalid HTML. Blank attribute names.
Where are you reading the actual release notes?
They link to the CVEs.
On the Ruby on Rails website, they kind of explain the patches a little bit cleaner.
Gotcha. Yeah, these are linking to the exact like GitHub advisory database things.
So they said there were 10 security issues. An issue where in development mode, an exception could be printed without escaping. This could affect developer running the server locally and clicking a malicious URL. Multiple potential XSS vulnerabilities in Action Pack, Action View, Active Support. I think you just mentioned that one. Yeah. 2 DOS vulnerabilities in active storage related to range requests. 2 DOS vulnerabilities in active support related to number formatting. Potential path traversal and glob injection vulnerability in active storage disk service. And insufficient filtering of metadata in active storage direct uploads.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So the disk service one, if you have relative paths like a dot or a double dot, those are now invalid key error raising paths, which is smart. That's good. And the glob thing was delete prefixed, escaped glob meta characters in the resolved path before passing to dir glob. Interesting. I don't even know if I've ever used delete prefixed before.
I don't think I have either.
Those seem to have affected back to 7.2. Is 7.1
looks like we used delete prefix though.
Uh-oh. Better fix it before we release this episode. Uh-oh.
It's not in a place that could make a difference.
You bet.
Damn, now you got me questioning whether I want that cut out or not.
Yeah, that was a busy week. So then I don't know what the exact policy is. I know that, we've talked about this in the past where like their hope was to kind of release every 6 months for Rails or whatever. So a day later, we got 8.1.3 and 8.0.5. So we didn't get a patch version for 7.2, just 8.0 and 8.1. But those got bug fixes. So there's custom objects, JSON gem coder encoder, inflection, better handling for acronyms. Dolly had the 4.0 warning with the Memcached store. Dolly 4.0 changes because Memcached D dropped some protocol support and stuff and just like simplified because the meta protocol or something is like does everything the other ones did and stuff. So Dolly now has been updated because there was like some argument changes or whatever in the Dolly gem that they drop like Sassel support. So username and password are just kind of ignored and stuff going forward. And I think those raised warnings or something. So that's good to see that that's finally out because I remember hitting that a while back.
Can you remind people what the Dolly gem is? Not me. I know.
It's just the Memcached D client.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is like some Hatchbox user, I remember, mentioned it right when that came out and got released. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Because then the Rails main had fixed it or something. But I was like, who knows how long we're going to have to wait until that drops. And it was like, I don't even know if they'll backport it or whatever. So it's good to see that. The Ruby 4 delegator warning when calling inspect on attributes. Fix no method error when deserializing integer objects marshaled under Rails 8.0. Insert all, upsert all log message when it called on anonymous classes is fixed. Sure. Ignore tables is respected when dumping SQLite virtual tables now. That's good. Bump the minimum Postgres version to 9.5 due to usage of array position function. Fix support for table names containing hyphens. Fix column deduplication for SQLite and Postgres virtual generated columns. Wasn't Jamie one that had created an issue for Postgres or something virtual columns? That may still be an open issue. I remember I subscribed to it or replied to that at some point, but that feels like it's been years ago now. Some of the virtual column support in Rails is really close, and there's like a PR. It's just needs that nudge to be pushed over the edge to get added or whatever. Because there's some stuff that's like the return values of your query don't get returned. You have to request the virtual columns be included in the response or something, and they're not, or whatever it was. It's been so long. Something like that is in there. I think it still hasn't gotten merged yet. Fix Postgres schema dumping to handle schema qualified table names and foreign key references that span different schemas. Wow. Action views got a couple little things. Fix active storage blob content type predicate methods to handle nil. Add libvips to generated ci.yaml. Well, Steve Polito there. Thank you for your service.
Salute.
Yeah, that looks like about it. So some very minor things for the most part.
This might be a good opportunity to explain what Memcached is.
Yeah, it is key value store in memory, more or less. Designed to be a cache store where you cache things in RAM because it's super duper fast. A lot of people use Redis to do that, but you have to be careful with Redis that... So Memcache is specifically designed for caching. So you allocate a specific amount of RAM, like 64 megs, I think is like the default size or whatever, which may be very small for your production or whatever. But the idea with it is you insert new stuff and then the least recently used is purged if it runs out of space when you're inserting something new. So it just automatically maintains that maximum size for you, which is great. With Redis, you can do the same thing, insert data. You can set it to expire keys at a certain size, but you have to explicitly opt into that in the Redis configuration because I think by default it just saves everything, which is what you want when you're using it for Sidekick jobs or whatever else. Or even if you're using it for action cable messages, if your database gets full to a certain size, you don't want to just drop the old messages necessarily. Maybe you do in some cases, but you want to explicitly know that. So it's really kind of conceptually the same thing, but designed just for caching in mind. And I think it makes it super easy to create a cluster of those so you can have a whole bunch of instances and they can talk to each other or whatever and sync stuff. I'm not sure what all it does at that level.
Are you tired of babysitting your job queues? Let us do it for you. JudoScale monitors and autoscales your job queues so you can stop babysitting and get back to coding. We support Sidekick, SolidQ, GoodJob, and just about every other job backend in Rubyland. And of course, we autoscale your web services too. JudoScale scales up your apps faster than any other autoscaler, so requests, timeouts, and backed up job queues are mitigated before they become a problem. JudoScale has a free plan you can use forever, so there's literally no risk, whether you're on Heroku, AWS, Render, or any other cloud platform. Visit judoscale.com and get your job queues under control.
Requests to Redis aren't cached, right? Because if you have a massive amount, if you have something stored in Redis and it's big, every time you need to, it's cached in Redis, but you have to still make that request to Redis to get it out every time.
Yeah. If you're rendering a to-do list, you have to go, hey, Redis, do you have to-do number 1? and it will return you something or nothing. But you have to then know that, okay, it returned something, we'll just render that. But if it didn't, we need to insert the new HTML. We actually need to generate the HTML, insert that into Redis, set an expiration so that it only lasts for 24 hours or whatever your expiration key is, that sort of thing. And then you can do that optionally. You don't have to specify an expiration. You can just let the data store decide. If nobody's asked for this to do in 1,000 days, we've inserted some new stuff and like, all right, we'll just delete that because it doesn't seem like anybody needs it. That's pretty much the process. It's just like a key and a value, and you're just retrieving that or writing to it when you need to write a new cache entry. So yeah, nothing terribly exciting with it, but some of that stuff of like automatic cleaning, you can think of it like a hash that just is able to clean itself when an old key is unused and something new is added to the list, in a sense.
Yeah, we were storing, okay, we got to load this JSON file for some data. And we're like, okay, well, we don't, because it's a big file, we don't want every time a user has to go to this route or do this thing for that to have to be loaded every time. So we're like, okay, well, we'll cache it in Redis. Well, the problem with that is that because of like you reaching out to get that key is not cached, but you're storing the cached data in there, it was actually taking too long to like go get the value out of Redis because it was so big.
Interesting. That's not normally a problem. It's usually pretty fast. Very small, 0.3 milliseconds or something. But
yeah, I think this was taking over 3 milliseconds, maybe more than that, but it was like a big file.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, normally it's super fast, and like even the cache stores and Rails will try to take advantage of like, you can get multi or whatever it's called in Redis. So if you have like a to-do list with 100 to-dos in it, you could say like, go fetch 10 of these in parallel or something. And then that way Redis could return a bunch of things faster rather than having to say, hey, give me one, wait for the response, give me the next one, wait for the response, et cetera, et cetera. You could do it in bulk sort of to try and even optimize that a little bit more too. Yeah, that's interesting. We had a Hatchbox customer that migrated from Heroku. I don't remember if we talked about this, but he had a ton of caching needs because his app was getting hit by bots and everything pretty hard. And the biggest issue when he moved was you've got a warm cache on Heroku, starting with a cold cache on Hatchbox. And the main issue was basically like, you can't populate the cache because the cache generation for these documents was like 20 seconds a piece or something. And there was like 1.3 million records or something, a ton, that was like, this is going to take days to go through if you're doing this and it's not very parallelized. And so that became kind of a fascinating problem where you're getting all these requests. They're just backing up in the queue to be processed. They're all triggering these jobs to like handle a request that's going to take a minimum of 20 seconds. It's going to try to write to the queue, but in that 20 seconds, you could have 30 or 100 requests to that same page that are all going to be like, oh, this is not in the cache. So they're all going to start doing the generation as well. And he ended up having to like go fix his application so that there was a lightweight version of rendering the content if it wasn't cached, so that he could still generate the final cache version, but yet not block all the requests and things that were happening in the meantime and stuff. And I think he was generating the cache stuff in the CLI or Rails console or rake task and had a job to like go do that. So then he could kind of not have the requests kick off a whole bunch of duplicates as well. It was like, hey, if it's not in the cache, just render the lightweight version of it and don't worry about it. And then the background could generate the cache and stuff. So it's quite complex once you get into some of those needs, which is interesting because like so many people I remember hearing that had worked at GitHub and had talked about like, yeah, we don't really cache much at all. And I was like, that's crazy because it feels like an application like that. Just look at the Rails repo or the Laravel repo or any of these popular ones. Surely all of that stuff, you would just cache that every single issue or whatever. A lot of times those issues just sit for so long, they'll get viewed, but they won't necessarily have new activity or whatever on it. Or like the diff and the code and all that needs to be syntax highlighted and everything. No, it's not. As far as I kept hearing, is like, we don't use caching very much. And I was like, dang, that is a fascinating thing. Because if you can get away without caching, you do avoid a lot of troublesome problems and things. So if you can skip it, it can be really good. But yeah, I always thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, I would imagine it's because the cost of saving all that cache doesn't outweigh the benefit of what it would provide.
Right. We could throw faster servers at it and just render the page. And that is probably a lot less complex. And well, it's GitHub. They were pretty big. And so is Microsoft. They're not too small of a company. They've got a few dollars in their bank account.
Microslop.
Speaking of GitHub, did you see, who was it? Somebody on X was talking about, here's a glimpse of the absolute insanity in numbers in our industry right now. Attributed Claude activity over the last 90 days on GitHub. And it's a graph that goes from like, I don't know, 10 million lines of code added in Christmas Day or something. And then it's like close to 800 million lines of code a day added today, something like that.
A day?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
It's nuts. And it shows too, like lines deleted, and it's like a fraction of lines added. And these days, though, it's like gone way up to like one of the days is around 400 million lines deleted, 800 million added. Insane. And that's just Claude activity. Honeybadger helps you fix errors, eliminate performance bottlenecks, and dig into the details faster than ever before. With support for Ruby, Elixir, and 8 other languages, it's the best way to gain real-time insights into your application's health and performance. Keep your apps fast and error-free at honeybadger.io. That's www.honeybadger.io.
Here's a fun fact for everyone. If you go into your Claude settings.json file, you can turn off that attribution so that every time you commit with Claude, it doesn't add it as a contributor.
Yeah. That was something I was listening to Primogen's podcast, and I think Tej was talking about this. And it's like one of the measurements of like AI being good at writing code is like right now, its default for the most part is just to continue adding code. Every change you ask it to do, it just like sort of adds more, and it does delete stuff and whatever. But like in general, the more activity, the more it's just going to grow the complexity and stuff. And it's like a good measurement of it is maybe can it keep it simple and delete stuff and like actually go back and clean things up instead of just adding new things. And I was like, that's a good way to look at it and see how it's progressing or whatever. But my goodness, that is probably why GitHub has been very flaky lately and has had a fair bit of downtime. Because
okay, yes.
Can you imagine the scale of this?
If I have to press the merge button and it doesn't merge, it just says merge already in progress when it's not doing anything. And then you keep trying and eventually you're able to finally merge it. Dude, this is getting on my nerves. It's been 2 days in a row of this.
Yeah, their status page has had a lot of yellow and red. Not the best, but frankly, like it is kind of insane how much volume of stuff they're probably seeing in activity.
Well, Jamie had a good point yesterday. He was like, the general maxim is that each 9 of uptime costs you 10x the resources of the previous. So 99.99% uptime is 10x more expensive as 99.99. He said, by this measure, calculate how many hundreds of millions GitHub has saved with this new strategy of whatever it is now. It doesn't feel like 99 either.
That's why I only strive for 1.9 of uptime.
Yeah. As long as there's a 9 on the page, we're good.
Yeah. It could be 0.9 uptime.
Yeah,
It
sure.
counts. Yeah.
It could be 1.9%. I mean, that's a 9.
Oh,
Hey,
I don't know. What else is new?
I don't know. All that discussion about Redis brought me back to a troubling time in my young development career when I was tasked with, they were like, this page was really unperformant. So we hired some contractors and they came in and they just put everything in Redis on this page, basically like chunks of HTML, like a ton. And they're like, but now it's got some problems and we kind of need it to be undone or optimized or something. And I spent a month or two and got nowhere whatsoever. It was the most complex thing I'd ever. It made no sense why they did it in the first place. Like there were so many other options, but they're like, nah, let's just put the sidebar in Redis because
I mean, why not?
it was just such a mess.
I knew where that was going the minute you said they hired some external people to do it.
Yeah. It was like, I need someone who works here to help me understand what's going on, but none of them understood it either. So, all right, well, these contractors, either they're geniuses or they're not. Either they're geniuses because they made this so complex that they knew they'd have to be rehired anytime it needed to be updated, or they're not, and they just made this decision. And yeah, I was starting to think like, maybe I'm not a good developer at all because I can't do anything here.
When you said sidebar, it triggered a memory of what I did this week. We were talking earlier about like, what are we even going to talk about? I don't remember what happened this week, which is the usual pre-podcast discussion. But now I remember, have you guys used nested layouts in Rails much?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you like them?
Yes and no. Like, I think they're great sometimes, but I think sometimes people take them way too far.
Yeah.
And once you get nested inside of nested inside of nested, it's like, okay, whoa, like what's going on here?
Yeah. David, have you used nested layouts?
I remember playing with them briefly a while back, but I haven't actually used them for anything serious.
That's kind of how I was with them for so long. I've got a couple that I used, and I ended up making another one this week, which was just a simple sidebar layout. So the way that they work, for anybody that's not familiar, you create a layout and you have your typical application layout, but instead of it calling yield in the application layout, you override that and you say, if there's content for, and you give it a name like main or content or something, that
pages
kind of,
layout.
You got to have like this generic name that kind of replaces where the nested layout would go in the application layout. So you end up where the application layout just kind of lays out your head tag for the most part and maybe a footer or something. But the main content inside of the page, at least what I'm doing, is a separate layout called sidebar. And I've done this in the past, not fully grasping like a reliable, reusable way of doing like a sidebar layout. And I figured it out this week, at least in a way that felt clean. So what I've done in the past is I do like a nested layout where I'd have like, for Hatchbox, for example, it'd be like all the links on the sidebar for your applications. So we'd have like a apps layout that is nested inside of the application layout. And in there, we would say, here's the dashboard, here's your repository settings, here's your domain and SSL settings, and all those links are in the sidebar. And basically your views yield into the sidebar layout, and then that captures all the content inside of it and then puts it in rendering the application layout. So your nested layout's responsible for saying, hey, render me inside of the parent layout. And it's very confusing when you look at this for the first time. But what I struggled with was like, how in the heck am I going to do this like as a reusable thing? I really want just a generic sidebar layout so I don't have to do a special one for clusters and apps and databases and whatever else. But this week I realized, why don't I just throw another content for like a yield inside of the sidebar section? So then each of the views could say, hey, just render this sidebar. And then we can have like a sidebar layout that's extremely generic that anybody could use for any purpose. And if you really have a whole ton of views, like for applications, they have a ton, you could do a double nested layout so that your layout can have all the application links in it, but then it can share the sidebar layout that then renders the application layout. So you end up with 3 layers. But the nice part is that whenever you have something brand new that needs to use the sidebar layout, you can just start there. And then if you need to change all the sidebars, you can do it all at once. And then the further niched down each nested layout gets, the more specific it is to only one section of your app. And then you can go into your like controller and just say layout, either sidebar, and then have the views inject their sidebars, or you can say like layout apps. And that one is going to render the nested layout and be very specific and just kind of, that's where those navigation items are hard coded in there. But it's kind of a mind bender when you look at that stuff for the first time or the second time or the 10th time, because I always forget and have to go look it up. Okay, render template layouts application. Okay. And then I got to do a content for here, and I've got to yield this name specifically into the other one. And it gets a little confusing, but I was really happy with how clean it turned out, because now my sidebar stuff lives in a partial. So I just have a simple render this sidebar partial in the top of the views if I am not ready to extract the nested layout. So yeah, I'm happy with how that works. I think I extracted that into Jumpstart, so anybody else can do that too in there, but don't see a lot of content on that. So I'm going to have to make a screencast.
Yeah. He reminded me of something that I found the other day that was like, oh my God, this is so smart, where a common thing that you're going to be asked of when you're building a sidebar is like, well, when they're on this page, we want that link to be highlighted in the sidebar, and it should be dynamic. So when they change pages, obviously the sidebar is, correctly selected. And if it's nested, we want that handled as well. And I saw somewhere where, okay, well, when we render the sidebar, let's pass in the request path, and then we will look at the paths. And based on that, we'll be able to know what the top highlighted is and what the bottom, or like the nested item that needs to be highlighted as well. It's like, this is slick.
Yeah, I wrote a nav link to helper a long time ago. I don't know, more than 10 years ago, probably at this point, something around there, that is a regular link to, but there's an option called starts with. So at the very top level, you want to highlight those, and it'll default to the path that you give it. So if it's like apps, it'll be like anything apps 1, 2, 4, 8, whatever. But then the nested ones are included as well. If you pass in the like anything that starts with apps/domains, apps/settings or whatever, that helps with those. But you can also kind of do it as well where it starts with this subset or whatever and be more specific on it. Because if, you got expandable menus in your sidebar that's like, here's the top level thing, and then there's nested stuff under it. Maybe it's collapsible. Maybe there's 2 or 3 layers. That can be quite a few levels of matching there. And yeah, luckily it's all kind of the same patterns, which is convenient because you can also use the Rails helpers. So if your Rails helper changes its path or something, they're still dynamically generated, so they'll still match, which is good. What is the name of that helper? Current path or something? There's something built into Rails, but it's not near as detailed or whatever as you might need. I forget what that is. Current path sounds about
current
right.
Page?
current page might be right. Find it.
Yeah, I'm looking.
URL helper, current page question mark. And you can ask if it's the controller, the action, a full URL, a path. Check if the parameters match too. A whole bunch of stuff it can do. Heck, that could probably be a refactoring. I don't know that we use current page inside of our thing to do the check. I think we just match the two parameters that you pass in. I'm not sure. I don't remember now. Or yeah, we probably use request.path and just compare those. This is nice because it will go do some additional stuff, checking parameters or the full path and just some additional stuff that we don't really do in ours. It's kind of nice. This also reminds me, I saw the link to if in there. What was it, yesterday or this morning? Probably yesterday. Colin and I were talking about link to if. He was like, isn't there, we were talking about doing something to like hide content or a link to it if something was true. And he was like, isn't there a helper for that? And I was like, there is, but it doesn't ever do what you expect it to do because it still always outputs the text instead of what you usually are thinking of, which we were talking about was like just using a regular old if statement to not render the content if it was false, which is always funny because it's like technically the name of the helper is probably the best it could be because it's really sort of what it does. It's so funny to read because it's not actually what you ever expect it to do. Like you expect it to just render nothing, like a return nil or something if it doesn't match. But yeah, I found very, very few use cases where that was helpful for me.
Yeah. The first thing that came to mind when you were saying that was probably just because I was also doing something like this earlier today was, well, you could like add like a data attribute onto the link that's like data thing and then the value of true or false. And then in your CSS, write a selector for that data attribute.
Yeah.
That's like, if it's this, like hide it.
Yeah. I really, really like those. That has become my go-to pattern for like an empty state where you've got like a list of apps or whatever. And if there are none, then inside, like Tailwind's got, what is it? The only selector. That's what it is. Basically, you have a div, and inside you would loop through all of your apps or projects or whatever. And then after or before that loop, inside the parent div, you would say it would be hidden only block. And then basically that's going to be hidden. But if I'm the only item in my parent, then I'll be display block. So it automatically with CSS hides that, which is really, really awesome because you get like, as we were talking about earlier, really great compatibility with caching because then you can just cache that and you don't need that extra state to cache of empty. It's just like there. It's just done. There's no swapping that out, which is cool. So yeah,
I was just working on something
features
very similar to that where it's like we have this paginated list, but if there's nothing in the paginated list, we want to show like a placeholder that's like, well, this is where object will show up when you add object or whatever. And if you combine has and not, you can basically like display this as a block if it does not have these items as children. And that way you can do like a deeply nested thing. So it's like your pagination thing can be like complicated, but if you combine have and not, you can get that placeholder show without the extra logic. And then once again, you get the caching benefits as well as like not having to pass around more logic.
That's nice. One of the things I have in a lot of places is like, if there's only one page of results from Pagey, then don't render the pagination. I'm betting I could do like a peer has anything inside of it or whatever selector and then just like hide and show that accordingly with CSS. That would be slick. That would be really nice not to have to render or not have a conditional around rendering the pagination. Because the other annoying thing about that is like usually I have to put an if statement around it because I'll put like a text center or like a center MX Auto kind of thing around the pagination. So it's like centered on the page contents, which ends up just ending like it's cleaner to write that as several lines instead of, I wish it could just be like render pagey if there's more than one page of results. I would love if it was just a clean one-liner there, but it's never quite that easy or whatever. So yeah, those things are great because if I can reduce some of the logic in my code by using CSS to do the logic for me, then I like that a lot. It saves a lot of mental overhead. If you ever have to come back to that, then you're like, I got to relearn how this hides and shows, but it's usually not that hard to come back to and relearn.
I actually worked on an app once that had that built into the pagination, that it did not display the pagination controls if it only had one page of results, and I had to rip it out because they didn't just have the pagination controls themselves. They also had like the little drop down where you could tweak how many items per page are displayed. And so like you bump it up to 100 because you want to see more of the list. Well, now there's only 95. You no longer have the pagination controls. So they're all gone because it's all one page. So yeah. I have very strong negative opinions about conditionally rendering pagination controls because it's like the moment you do that, it's just like, well, what if you actually need them on that page at some point? It never feels like it's worth it after I ran into that.
That makes a lot of sense. All of mine are just a flat 25 per page or whatever. So I don't have that. And that makes sense where you would just, I would say, screw it. Even if there's one page, just render the one page of pagination there. It's also better. It trains the user in a way to see this is where the pagination will be or whatever.
Yeah.
The other cool thing is like, have you used geared pagination from 37 Signals or Basecamp?
Not in production.
I don't think I've used it in production either. Conceptually, the thing it does is basically like if you go to page 2 or if you don't find the results on the first page, chances are you're going to be doing some digging. So it starts to expand the count on the further pages. So like the first page of results might be just 25. The next one might be 50. And then from then on out, it might be 100 per page. Because it's like, well, if you're on page 3, you're digging for something. So I always just thought that was so creative and intuitive of a way of handling that, where you're like, I could totally remove that option to choose how many per page, because it's kind of built into the logic here of how the library does the pagination itself. And in theory, yeah, you don't really need to customize that 99% of the time. There are probably use cases where you do, and you've got some big data focused application, but for a Basecamp or any of their type of products, that geared pagination makes so much sense. Probably wouldn't be very hard to add that as a paginator into Pagey. That'd be kind of cool to add as an option.
Yeah, I just do all infinite scrolling now.
Oh, God. Get out of here.
Nah, dude, it's the way.
It's the worst.
It's the way.
It's the worst. No,
it's the way. Especially if you know what display contents does.
I was just looking at that.
I feel pretty proud about that one.
So here's a funny thing. I've been redoing some styles on Hatchbox, and I wanted to put like a default underline on anchors and like remove them if they're in the sidebar or whatever. But like general content would have underlines. And I added the text decoration offset, I think it is. So the underline is not like butted real close up to your text. It's actually like 6 pixels down, which is underneath any like G characters that dip down and whatever. So it looks like it just gets a little more space and whatever. It looks nice. But I was talking to Colin and I was like, dude, check this out. Some of the links in our app, some of them have the underscore. Some of them don't. What the hell is going on? And I tracked it down because some of the links in the sidebar, they're all using the exact same classes. And all of the links, except for the bottom one, have no underscore. And I was like, why don't those have underscores? And you go into the inspector and you're poking around the CSS, it has the underscore properties, all of them, but the underscore isn't being displayed except for the bottom link. And the bottom link, the only difference was it had an SVG in it. And as it turns out, those links were flex and overflow hidden, because there would be like flex and you could have an icon before or after. But because of the overflow hidden and that text decoration offset, the underline was actually just outside of like the contents of the text. So like the line height or whatever I bet you that is part of the calculation or whatever. Those all had the underline just gone. And I was like, those look how I wanted them to look. So that's great. Why do I have to fix this one? And it was the SVG was tall enough that it was making that underline still visible when it calculated the size of the contents there. That was the weirdest little CSS thing I've had to debug for a while, because I could not for the life of me figure out what was wrong. They're all the exact same styles, but sure enough, it was like just a little SVG there that was taller.
I had a feeling where that was going, and I was exactly right. Because as soon as you said 6 pixels, I'm like 6 pixels, that's a lot. And I was like, are you not running into issues where it like butts up against stuff or over? Yeah. So
generally it's perfect. And that's what like Caleb Porzio uses for Flux. And yeah, generally always looks great. But yeah, if you do have your line heights there or whatever it is to calculate those, then it can be overflow hidden away. Old CSS. The other thing we've been like desperately hoping to use and just so maddened by, now that anchor positioning is like available everywhere in all browsers, it's like newly available though, like not to the point where you can actually use it. Anchor positioning is freaking great. So if you have drop-down menus, you don't have to do any JavaScript now. You can click a button and it will toggle the popover, and your menu will render and go from display none to display block or whatever. And that's phenomenal. That works in most browsers, but the positioning of that is the weird thing. So when you do something that's marked as a popover, there's a top layer that it actually renders inside of. So it's not in with all the rest of the content of your page. So then you have no way of referencing your button anymore. So you could say like position absolute and align it to the top right where you click the button. That's going to go put it somewhere totally different, because it's a whole like separate sheet of paper that you're working with basically on top. And you'll like click the button and then like the page gets taller because your popover was inserted beneath the body or whatever. It sucks. And there's a polyfill for it. There's a polyfill for the popover API, which is great. If somebody for whatever reason is using a really old browser, that's just a JavaScript API. So that's easy to polyfill. Polyfilling freaking CSS? No, not easy, not at all. And we've been trying to get that to work. Even the like official polyfill website just doesn't work in some of the examples. And a whatever Firefox 117 or 121 or whatever it is, like I forget how far back Tailwind goes for browser support. It's quite a ways. So I was trying to like match that somewhat around there and use the polyfill. And the way that it works is it makes a web component wrapper around your things. And then it tries to like position absolute inside of, or it tries to grab the button, find it, but then inside of the top layer, it tries to position absolute relative to where that button would be on the regular layer. But it was not working for me, no matter what I tried. I spent way too many hours fiddling with it, but it's so close. I just want to use these new features, but I can't force people to upgrade. Like you could force people to upgrade Chrome and Firefox, but not Safari. Safari, no. You're just kind of tied to versions with the operating system and stuff. It's not as easy.
Well, I had a really interesting bug this week where someone was like, on Safari, when I click this button, it renders the popover, but it's behind the sidebar. And like, I look at this image and I'm like, sure enough, this popover is like half hidden behind another element. I was like, oh, that's weird. I think I can fix that. And
ZNX 9999999, right?
So I open it on my computer and I'm like, wait, I don't see that. And then I open up production. I'm like, I don't see that here either, even on the exact same place that he did it. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? So come to find out, he was on Safari 17. I was on Safari 26.
It's 17.
17 was like the latest on the non-Tahoe, I think.
Yeah. That's kind of the problem, right? Like Safari is a bit tied to the Mac OS releases, isn't it?
But see, that's the thing. So I was like, oh, well, I'll find a developer who didn't upgrade to Tahoe and we'll get this figured out. And because there were several people on my team who were like, yeah, we're not upgrading to Tahoe. I don't want that. And I'm like, okay, cool. But so I asked those people and they're like, well, I am on the old macOS version, but my Safari is updated to 26. I thought they were tied explicitly, but apparently not, because there's several people who are not on the latest Mac version, but do have the latest Safari.
Interesting. Did they have the bug?
No.
They didn't. So it's got a newer WebKit or whatever then on that. Interesting. I upgrade Mac OS, so I don't ever really have too old of I guess I could install a VM of it, but that's a good question. I don't know. Maybe they install it through the App Store or something. Then
that's the only thought I had. I think you can also download it specifically from Apple. The other day, I like upgraded my computer to like a beta version, and I had to go to like the Apple developer website to download the beta Xcode and command line tools. And I know you can download like Safari technical previews. So,
right. This result here says Safari is pre-installed on all Apple devices and cannot be downloaded separately on these platforms, but rather updated via system software updates. I don't know. It also seems ridiculous that isn't something that is independent, that you can just download Chrome or something. I don't know. Freaking Apple sometimes. Getting CSS anchor positioning to a point where you can use it for tooltips and drop downs and everything will just be so freaking nice. There's so many little things too that like we did use it, and even in Safari 26, the current version wasn't working perfectly, so we rolled back something to do with that back to just doing some position absolute stuff. Then you can use like floating UI for it too. But my God, floating UI feels like somebody gave you a bunch of resistors and a circuit board and you got to like put it all together yourself. Just please, I don't even care if you give me all the tools to make it. Just like give me an example with everything pre-done for tooltips and for drop downs, because it can do all that and it can do a lot of fancy things. I don't want to have to piece together every little thing, because there are little things of like auto compute position, which is great, but that it conflicts with the flip option, which like say you have a drop down, you can have it, I guess, flip up or down. If it's too close to the bottom of the viewport, you could have it like flip and display it above or like left to right. But the auto position thing is like, we can just move it from the top to the bottom, to the left, to the right, to like whatever's the most convenient place for it. And like, you probably don't want that for a drop-down menu, but like those conflict. And then the docs kind of assume that you're like already very familiar with all the little nuances to the options and the flags and whatever. And it's like, a lot of them are kind of vaguely explained and not super clear. And so I was like, I really don't want to go through and replace our drop-down logic with this. And it's 4 packages or something. You can use it with import maps, but it's several things to maintain and update. But it's a little annoying because it ends up being a lot of JavaScript, a lot more than you would expect. Like a plugin architecture of like, here's the middleware stack, run it through all these things, and it's like, okay, fine, but each one of those now needs : callbacks for various options that you want to turn on, or you need to put some logic in there, which it makes sense to use callbacks for, because then people can do whatever custom logic they want instead of hard coding in the order of fallback positions or something. But like, that's how the CSS fallback positioning works for anchor positioning. So like, that's fine to me. I just don't want to have all this complexity. Like, if I could just grab the library and say like, give me the default tooltip version and the drop-down version. Align it left or right. I don't care. Just give me those two options for drop-downs. That's it. That's all I want. So maybe I need to build another JavaScript. Maybe build a package on a package so that we can have the floating UI easy mode or something. Why has it got to be so hard?
I don't know. It just does.
It is the worst. I just want things to be easy, but it's never the case.
No, it never really is. All right. Well, call it a day.
I'm done venting. Thanks for the therapy session, like every week.
I was looking to see if there was a post CSS plugin for what you were looking for, because they have a bunch of like polyfill-esque plugins, but I do not see one.
For anchor positioning. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say too, the Flux UI has drop downs, and so does Tailwind Plus Elements. And both of those use custom web components like the polyfill does. And they use the popover API, but I think because they're in a custom element, that element can trigger the popover when you click it, and then it can tell the popover like, hey, I'm at position XY. We want an offset of 6 pixels and we want to be like aligned right. So then set your position absolute in the top layer, even though like you have no reference to me anymore. Here's the top layer position that you should have. And it will add inline styles or whatever to those to pull that off. And it seems like both of those do that. But also, I'm willing to go do that and set that up. But like, I don't really want to write that from scratch. Surely somebody's written that already, and then I could grab a library like that, which sounds basically like what the polyfill would be. But those are both proprietary libraries, and it's like, can't really find a quick, easy library to grab for that. And I was like, you know what, screw it. Our drop-down menus are fine, but the second that I can use those and drop all this stuff, like get rid of some stimulus controllers, I'm all in. Can't wait. I just want to do that. I hate having these new features and you just can't use them. Sucks.
Internet Explorer's entered the chat.
Yeah. It's the worst. That's the thing that I've loved the most about, I feel like the Ruby community always embraces the new stuff pretty much right away. People want to upgrade to Ruby 4 immediately, whereas the Python community, it was like, Python 3, ugh, screw that. I'm not doing that. What a weird difference in philosophies in the communities there, but it matters so much in the long run. So it's good to be in a community that embraces the new stuff. I will say that.
100%.
Alrighty. Well, gentlemen.
Until next time.
Yeah.